The Witcher franchise has already sold over 25 million copies. It's a great success, that's for sure, but is the Blood and Wine expansion truly the last we've seen of the franchise? Of course it's not. After all, the team at CD Projekt Red is currently working on the Gwent card game, which, while not being an open-world RPG, is without a doubt part of the Witcher experience. Apart from that, at a recent conference, the company's CEO Adam Kiciński made this statement in regard to the next Witcher game. The Witcher was designed as a trilogy, and as such it can't have a fourth installment. Still, we really like this world. We've invested 15 years of our lives and a lot of money into it. We will think about it someday. We think rationally. From time to time we have bizarre ideas, but all in all we tend to think rationally. We have all the right to the Witcher games. They are ours. We put a lot of money into promotion. The brand is really strong. You can fill in the blanks. The most interesting thing about that is that the CEO himself said that it would be unwise not to make the next Witcher game. And it's not mere speculation, but natural course of events. For the sake of this video, let's call this upcoming project Witcher 4. It's obvious that Geralt's story came to a close, so a new Witcher would have to introduce a different protagonist and the overall idea for the game. Well, it all boils down to the upcoming cyberpunk game and the contrasting popularity of sci-fi and fantasy genres. Fantasy as we know it today is largely based on the ideas brought forth by the likes of Conan the Barbarian and The Lord of the Rings, with protagonists venturing to settings full of magical creatures, spells, and different races with their own unique history and mythology, most of the time inspired by the medieval period. Sci-fi, on the other hand, stems from 19th century novels. Visions of humanity's future sparked interest of the readers of authors such as Verne or Wells, who explored topics like the first contact with extraterrestrials or the impact of technology on one's life. And while both genres go overall hand in hand, or even often cross over and mix to create interesting hybrids, like for example in Star Wars, it's easy to notice that in the recent years fantasy has enjoyed much more popularity and became the go-to setting for most of the recent RPG games. After all, the original RPG was the fantasy Dungeons & Dragons. Sci-fi is also doing pretty good due to the recent renaissance of sorts in the cinematic form. But a quick glimpse into Google Trends shows us one undeniable fact. Fantasy can be even 3 times as popular as sci-fi. Now let's try to understand the reason for The Witcher's popularity in the West. Because it's the West, and the US in particular, that played the biggest part in helping achieve CD Projekt Red its high revenue, Sapkowski created an interesting combination. On one hand mixing Slavic mythology, and on the other popular motifs involving elves, dwarves, mages and such, but with a mature approach introducing themes like large-scale war, persecution, injustice and xenophobia. Such a combination was destined for success, as it wasn't seen for a while in the AAA segment of role-playing games. However, for today let's focus on what happened in 2011, as it was then that we saw a darker interpretation of the RPG tropes, but in a different game from what we're used to. In April of 2011, HBO started airing Game of Thrones, a fantasy TV show that quickly amassed a devoted fan base. Skyrim comes out a few months later, becoming the biggest RPG game on the market for the coming years. It's no coincidence, given those circumstances, that Skyrim achieved the success it did. With every consecutive year, the interest in Game of Thrones doesn't diminish. Quite the contrary. The Google Trends results clearly indicate that every new season increases the search trend, and for example, the 4th season had twice the ratings the show's debut had. When it comes to the small screen, that's a phenomenal success. The ratings skyrocketed even more in 2015 with the show's 5th season. So what happens when we compare the phrases Game of Thrones and Witcher 3? We instantly realize that Witcher's release took place precisely halfway through the show's record season. Apart from that, the fantasy genre has been greatly represented on the big screen, be it the aforementioned Lord of the Rings trilogy, the unnecessary Hobbit prequels, or the Harry Potter franchise, which is still popular to this day. The mix of dragons, monsters and kingdoms in peril is peaking in popularity. Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is a stunning game which, due to its overall quality, fully utilized the popularity of the genre. It was a grave mistake that George R.R. Martin's novels didn't get the same treatment in the form of a Game of Thrones open-world RPG. With its intrigues, unpredictable plotlines and darker atmosphere, Witcher 3 filled that void single-handedly. What's more, the show's own Tywin Lannister voiced Emperor Emhyr in the latest Witcher game, which certainly wasn't a coincidence but a deliberate marketing decision.
I thought you bowed before no man.
Didn't want to disappoint the Chamberlain. We're friends.
And thus the question arises, is Cyberpunk strong enough to duplicate Witcher's success? CD Projekt Red is facing a tough challenge when it comes to selling their next game. While sci-fi is less popular than fantasy, the cyberpunk genre is completely niche and was even losing popularity until 2013. To be more precise, the initial announcement of CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077. When it comes to the next game, the Polish studio can't rely on the current trends and has to fight their way to the top. And in some way they're managing just that, and since the reveal the popularity of the phrase has been slowly but steadily growing, even in other media. In 2017 we can see movies like Ghost in the Shell or the next Blade Runner, but I wouldn't over-exaggerate their impact. As of now, the Game of Thrones searches, even long after the latest season's finale, are still higher up than the searches for Ghost in the Shell on its release date. On the same chart, the seemingly anticipated Blade Runner sequel is barely visible. Other examples, this time directly from the video game industry, show that the cyberpunk setting isn't destined for success, even if the game wins over the press. In January we got news of the grim fate of the Deus Ex franchise. Square Enix was unsatisfied with the sales of Deus Ex Mankind Divided and was putting the series on hold, tasking the studio responsible with apparently more profitable projects based on Marvel Comics. Cyberpunk remains a pretty unpopular genre, and even referencing the Cyberpunk 2020 RPG system won't pave the way to success for the next CD Projekt Red title. I'm betting my money on the phrase, "a game by the creators of The Witcher," being the motto of the marketing campaign for the next game. The biggest issue of all, however, is that even industry legends, at least those with much more expertise than the creators of The Witcher, can't always make their new ideas sell. Even Blizzard can't make Heroes of the Storm popular, while, for example, Gearbox is still trying to lift itself up after Battleborn's spectacular failure to perform. Luckily for the Polish studio, though, it's gradually evolving on the market. The revenue is at the all-time high, and the studio itself is investing time and money into other projects. After all, apart from the upcoming Cyberpunk, they are currently polishing Gwent, a card game based on the Witcher universe, and working on one more mysterious project. Having many irons in the fire means that one failed game won't ruin the studio. Seeing how CD Projekt Red are playing their hand, it seems as if Gwent is a thought-out product that can pay for itself as well as eventually finance other projects. With actions on such a scale, the risk is greater than ever before for the Polish prodigies. We often see studios not making ends meet after investing millions in promising ideas, and that is precisely why industry big shots stick to the safe investments. For example, despite fan outcry, EA won't back down from releasing FIFA games on a yearly basis because each and every release still makes a lot of money. In a similar fashion, Activision keeps releasing Call of Duty games year after year. Despite declining popularity of the series, it still earns much more than otherwise ambitious but less popular projects. When trying to sell anything, one needs to take into account the needs of the consumer. Although those can be easily influenced, it's way easier to sell what is anticipated. In conclusion, here we can see the nature of good business. You want to surprise your fans, maintain their interest, but at the same time make something that aligns with their taste. And as I've shown before, fantasy is still at the peak of popularity, just like RPG and open-world games. The people at CD Projekt Red can tactfully evade answering the questions about the future of the Witcher franchise, but sooner or later the next Witcher, no matter what it looks like and what it's called, will be necessary, regardless of whether Cyberpunk 2017 makes it big or not.